build your team, empower your team, get your team aligned with your goals. You have to have courage and confidence and, base it on statistics and then go for it. Take calculated risks and have faith in yourself. Just do it. You want to delight your customers, not just provide customer service or customer satisfaction. Surprise them. Do something that really delights them and create raving fans. Accept your mistakes as part of your learning. You have to embrace them and then just try to put a correction into the system so you're not making the same mistake over and over again.
This is the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. My name is Rick Meekins. I'm the managing partner at Epiphany Business Consulting and your host for today. I am so delighted to have you in the studio. Thank you for being here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell so you can be notified every time we drop a new episode. Now let's get it started. Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. My name is Rick Meekins. I'm going to be your host today. And in the studio, we have Ral West. How are you today, ma'am?
I'm doing great, Rick. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, let's do this. Before we get started, I would love it if you, our audience, would like, subscribe, hit the bell so you get updates every time we drop a new episode. Now, without further ado, let's get it started. So, Raul, would you please give us a little bit of your background, who you are, what you do, and why you do what you do?
Oh gosh, Rick. Okay. Well, I became an entrepreneur almost 45 years ago when I moved to Anchorage, Alaska from my hometown of Seattle, by way of a small town in Alaska called Ketchikan. Spent a year there. And it was from there that I realized, I'm better off being my own boss. So I moved to the big city of Anchorage and started a little marketing consulting firm specializing in tourism. And it was there that I met my future husband. And he started picking my brain about the travel industry because he saw me flying off to Hawaii on free business trips. And he said, I want in on that. I want to go to Hawaii for free. So figured out a way from his real estate background to represent, Alaskans who had condos in Hawaii, and he would rent them for the owner and get a commission. But my background in tourism said, you'd really be better off packaging those condo stays with rental car and inter island air and, make it a whole vacation package. So he did that. And then I said, let's throw in the air from Alaska to Hawaii. And so we started buying seats from the scheduled airlines. And then eventually those scheduled airlines pulled out of the market and we had no way to get our customers to Hawaii. So we basically had nothing to sell. And so that necessitated a pivot to chartering our own planes. And we started with like a DC-8 on a summer charter. And that was successful, thank God, because we had bet the farm on it. And that would have been bad if we had done poorly. So we went on to charter like L1011s and 767s. And like the 11, it's an older plane, so it's not even flying anymore. But it was like 362 passengers, all in coach. So these were big planes. And we grew that business to 8 digits in annual revenue. We had the business for 25 years. And eventually we sold it to Alaska Airlines. But in the meantime, we were the mom and pop, running every aspect of that business. And we were in it, day and night. And it was really overwhelming and exhausting and demanding. And we recognized that we couldn't continue living that way. We were eating dinner with our little young daughter at the office, fast food. And she would be watching videos or doing her homework. And I'm like, oh God, what kind of a life is this? This is terrible. So I started studying. I went to mentors, went back to college, took seminars, read books, did whatever I could to kind of figure out how do we run this business in a way that we don't have to be on hand all the time to call all the shots. And that process took us about 5 years, at least, to get everything set up so that we could step back and be the owners and not the operators of the business and let our chief operating officer and chief financial officer run the show for us. And they did a great job. So several years before the sale to Alaska Airlines, we were off enjoying our second home on Maui and our yacht and, living the dream.
Nice.
And so at this stage of my life, my mission is to share that information with entrepreneurs who are, as we were at that time, in the thick of it, in the weeds, up to their eyeballs in the details of operating their business. And I want to free them from that and give them a life that they can really enjoy and a successful business. Why not have both?
Yeah, I love that. I absolutely love that. I think that's the thing. It's like we think about entrepreneurship, we think about freedom. We can do the things that we want to do, et cetera, but we have to build companies that don't need us hand hand to mouth, like you were saying. So
Yes.
you're teaching entrepreneurs now. What is your teaching program kind of look like?
Well, what I did when I started off just a little over 2 years ago was to comb my memory banks for what were the things that we did that really, really made the difference and made us super successful.
Mhm.
And I identified 6 principles that we had used. And these were the 6 principles that really, moved the needle for us. And they are 6 principles that are true for all businesses at any stage of the business, whether it's a startup or even large corporations can use these 6 principles as the basis, the foundation. I kind of call them my six-legged stool.
Mhm.
And I developed an organized to optimize framework around these 6 principles. I have an online course that I use to teach them. I think every entrepreneur needs to be familiar with these 6 principles.
Cool, cool. Do you want to run through them real quick? Or if it's
Sure.
not real quick, you want to go in deep? It's up to you.
Yeah. Well, I talk for hours about them, so I'll try to keep it short.
Okay, all right.
Principle number 1 is to develop systems. You have to have a standardized way of running your business in an efficient way. So you identify what are some of the processes that you can codify, write down, or record on a video somehow so that everybody on the team knows that this is how things have to be done and in this order. And in that process, you often will find ways to streamline your processes. Maybe use automation and technology to make it simpler and more efficient. So that's all about, looking at your systems and working on them so that you have a very smooth running business, like a well-oiled machine. And then the second principle is to measure and track your performance. Figure out what data points you really need to watch. Measure the data points that will really, move the needle. Because sometimes we get hung up on measuring something and it's not really going to make that much difference. Or if you measure the wrong thing, then your attention goes to where it's not needed. Getting a series of reports generated for you, whether it's weekly or monthly, quarterly or annually, and then using that data to make the decisions to run your business.
Mm,
We
mm,
found that we eventually had reports that we could receive wherever we were in the world and know what was happening with the business. And
oh,
some of them were daily reports. So we could keep tabs. Principle number 3 is to use leverage. Leverage is something that will save you time and find leverage. Like even having a mentor is good leverage, increasing your knowledge by using someone else's knowledge.
mhm,
Any get more with less, that's leverage. And using automation is a great form of leverage. Partnering with other businesses is a form of leverage. And delegating to your team is a great form of leverage too. Don't be doing everything yourself and just drop that idea that in order for it to be done right, I have to do it myself.
mm,
That shift that has to happen right away. You need to learn the art of delegating in order to do it successfully. So
mm,
that's principle number 3. And principle number 4 is pay attention to your company's culture. What is your culture? Do you have one that you've established intentionally, or did it just happen by accident? And oftentimes, if you let it happen by accident, it might not be the culture that you really want. And that's really going to make your business into the business that you want it to be. So be purposeful and intentional about your culture and communicate it to your team, to your customers, to your vendors, to the community. Make sure people know what you stand for, what are your values and principles, and how you guide your business. So
okay.
those principles 1 through 4. Principle number 5 is Team, build your team, empower your team, get your team aligned with your goals. I use the analogy of, being from Alaska, we have, dog sled teams. So picture dog sled teams where the dogs are harnessed in front of the sled, but they all take off in opposite directions. That sled doesn't go anywhere. It's a mess. Make sure that all of your dogs and all of your team moving in the same direction, and then your sled will move forward briskly. And that's what you want for your company. So we would use a series of, goals and incentives. When the company won, our team would win. And that got a great amount of alignment. And we were all moving towards the same target. And that was incredible. Yeah.
Awesome.
And lastly is your customers, customer service.
Yeah.
But it's not just any old customer service. I believe in delighting your customers.
Yeah.
Getting customer satisfaction is great, but customer delight, that's where you get raving fans and customers for life. So what can you do to make sure that your customers are totally delighted with your product and will use your product again and again and again, and will tell others about your product to get them to use it? So that's the real key. And another thing I remind people, businesses really without exception exist because of our customers.
Hmm.
Without them, we wouldn't have a business. So why not make your customers number one and have everything revolve around what they want and serving them? Too many businesses, and I know the ones that I'm a customer of, a lot of them don't seem to like me or value me. And, I end up thanking them for providing me with their service. And I'm thinking, gee, maybe it ought to be the other way around. Maybe they really need to be thanking me for coming to their business. And I think that the world has gotten away from, putting a strong value on their customers. And we need to get back to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You take
Absolutely.
all these 6 principles and you take them all together, and you have to pay attention to all of them, get them into place, and then you have to revisit them and reassess them time after time after time to make sure they're still working. Because, you need to tweak things. You set up a system, that system will work well for a while, and then, your business evolves and or some new technology comes along and, you need to make changes. You need to grow. So you have to keep going back again and again and reworking these same principles.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Hey, I'm a systems guy myself. Do you want to can you dig into that a little bit more just to give our audience a little bit of a greater understanding of what you mean by systems?
Okay, well, here's an example from one of my past businesses. So we operated jets between Alaska and Hawaii, carrying hundreds of passengers per plane. They were wide body jets. And the plane came from Honolulu, came to Anchorage, would make a turn in Anchorage and go back to Honolulu. Well, sometimes when it ended up in Anchorage, there, would be a little mechanical. A little light would come on in the cockpit or something, and it's like, uh-oh, we need to have this checked out. And if it wasn't something that could be fixed really quickly, and if the time dragged on, as I'm sure anybody who travels knows about these, lingering delays, rolling delays. And what would happen is that the FAA has a restriction on the number of hours that a flight attendant or a pilot can work without getting a rest period. So if they would go too long, then the 5.5 hour flight back to Honolulu, they could time out in the middle of the flight, and that wouldn't work for anybody. You want to make sure that you get all the way there before you have to end the flight because you're over the ocean. So we would have to have the plane sit in Anchorage until the flight crew could get their rest. And the rest period was like 8 or 10 hours, whatever the FAA mandated. So we would have all these passengers sitting around in the airport waiting to go to Hawaii. They want to go to Hawaii really badly.
Bet.
So we figured out a way just to make these delays easier. You can't make a delay a good thing ever. Nobody likes them. But
Right.
recognize that, gosh, there were mothers with little babies and they needed formula. They needed diapers. They hadn't planned on an extra 8 or 10 hours. So they needed to have these supplies. So we learned to stock these supplies in our office. And so when we had one of these delays, we'd have a team on standby, and we put it all in a manual, a delayed flight procedure manual. And the person at the airport who was the manager on duty for that flight would go to that manual and call the people that were on call that day. And those people would go to the office and pick up all these supplies. We'd have bottled water and formula and diapers and cash and vouchers, lists of hotels where we could accommodate people. If they didn't live in Anchorage, they needed to be put up in a hotel. And we would just, activate this and mobilize this team. And the delay would be less stressful. And the passengers would get that we cared about them, that we were trying to do everything that we could to make it easier for them. Now, again, you don't totally erase the inconvenience of a delay, but at least we were making it better. And that's an example of a system. So the system required, that we think through the processes and think through the steps and have a plan in action and have it in writing so that we could execute that plan when we needed to. So that's one example of a system.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. I love that story. I mean, that's one of those, those we didn't expect that to happen.
Yeah.
When it first happens,
Yeah.
and you realize you've got, X number of passengers, and as you said, babies and everything else that weren't planning on being there. That's amazing. So what you did is you figured out a way to, obviously you're delighting your customers, getting them from Anchorage to Hawaii,
Yeah.
and perhaps back again. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know if I'd want to come back, but I'm just saying.
People don't.
The guy, they don't need a passport, right?
Yeah.
So you moved towards delighting your customers, but you had to do that in a most difficult situation. How obviously it was intentional. So I'm thinking that, getting a hotel or whatever would have been kind of like the bare minimum. What kinds of did you do anything to really go out of your way to delight customers in that scenario, in those difficult scenarios?
Well, like I said, just making sure that their needs were taken care of and that we made it simpler for them. Because I've been a passenger on delayed flights, and the airline, barely tells us what's going on, much less does anything for us. Or they give you a voucher. We found that giving a restaurant voucher didn't always work because our flights were late at night and the restaurants would be closed, that are at the airport. So then we just resorted to, okay, we're just going to hand out cash, so that they can choose whatever restaurant they want to go to, and just, try to cut through the difficulties and make things easier for them as best we could. And, there were times delighting our customers in those days. We did things like taking a band and hula dancers to the airport to send them off. This was when we could still get out to the gates before all the TSA got shut everything down. But we would have, an aloha atmosphere at the airport so they could feel like they were starting their vacation before they even got on the flight. And
Amazing.
that just did a lot of things to just set the mood for their trip. Yeah, things like
So
that. And speaking of systems, the other thing that we did was that we spent several $100,000 to develop an online reservation system because our customers had, in those days, had to call us to make a booking. It was before most things were online, and the hold times would be, lengthy, and we were getting a lot of complaints. We were not delighting our customers in those days. And so we realized that, okay, we need to invest in technology. And there was no system out there. We couldn't just go to a store and say, give me an online reservation system. So we had to hire a software company to develop it for us. They had to write the program for us. And it took like 2 years. And like I said, a few $100,000. And we got that in place. And as soon as we did, then bookings could come in 24/7. People didn't have to call us. They didn't have to come to the office and stand in line and wait for a reservations agent. And, our business became so much easier to work with. They loved us. And it became a lot less expensive for us because we didn't have to hire as many reservations agents. So that's the way that you can use a system and delight your customers. So yeah, you have to think about what can you do differently than the way you're doing it right now? How can you be more efficient and more responsive to what your customers want?
yeah, yeah. And how did your team? like work with this? Because your team is on the ground. They're interacting with the customers. They're on the phones, et cetera, et cetera. And the communication is coming back to you. So I imagine to some degree you had to empower them to be able to make decisions. And is that right? So
Absolutely.
this is part of your culture. Is that right?
Yes, we had some guiding principles for our culture. We called them our work ethic, but that work was spelled WERQ. Now, the W stood for win win, and the E stood for efficiency. The R was responsibility, take responsibility. And the Q was quality. So we empowered our team to say, you know what, if you're following these guiding principles, if it's a win win, if you're doing what's efficient, if you're taking responsibility and taking the action that's needed and making sure that it's a quality experience, a quality product, go for it. We'll back you. So we allowed them to make decisions if they followed our guidelines. Yeah. And this whole delayed flight system actually did not come from my husband or me. That we had a system in place, but it was our team that said, it would be really nice if we had formula and diapers, and it would be really nice if we had water. And so we said, great, do it. So yeah, we were all about taking suggestions because like you said, they were on the ground, they were on the front line. They knew what was needed, and we needed to back them up and provide them with those tools. Yeah.
What gave you guys so I mean, you guys started this company. What gave you guys the confidence that you could trust in the team, and what gave the team the confidence that they could come to you with these challenges?
It
That
didn't
open door policy isn't always organic for business owners.
It didn't happen overnight. It was a process. Back in the early 90s, things were kind of a mess. Our business was not as smooth and efficient as I'm making it sound right now. We had a lot of challenges, and our customers were not that happy. I ended up going back to college and studying organizational management. And then one of the things I learned was total quality management, which was developed by W. Edwards Deming, right after World War II. And I studied that. I said, okay, we need a total quality management system here at Hawaiian Vacations. And I put that process into action. And, again, that was not overnight. It probably took a year or so to get everybody up to speed. What is TQM? What do you mean? What is this? And so we rolled it out a little by little and trained our people and got them indoctrinated. But another thing that was really critical for us was that win-win that I've talked about. And I mentioned earlier when we were talking about team, you get team alignment when you provide an incentive. Well, we said, when we win, you win. So if we have a profit goal and we meet that profit goal, we're sharing that profit with you. And here's the percentage of the profit that we're sharing with all of you. And they get bonus checks, 4 or 5 digit bonus checks. And they were very happy. I remember giving a bonus to somebody and they burst into tears because they said, this is the down payment for a house. Thank you so much. And so we all started crying. It was just amazing. And of course, that rippled throughout the company. It was not that big a company. They knew that that person had just been empowered to buy a house because of their bonus. So, that really cements and aligns it just galvanizes the team towards wanting the same thing and that common objective. As I said before, that is what makes a team really a winning team because we're all in this together. My husband and I just demonstrated that we're all about making sure everybody wins. We're all about making sure that our customers win, and we want you to win. And we needed to make sure our vendors won too. It was not our planes that we were flying. We were chartering them from another company and they operated them. So we needed to make sure that, we were doing what we needed to do to make sure that they won, and the hotels and the condominiums and the rental car companies and all of that. We had to work with everybody, make sure it was a win-win, win-win-win, you know? So,
I
yeah.
love that.
It probably took like 5 years altogether to get everything in place and get to the point where my husband and I could say, "Oh, we've done it. We've set up a business that can run without us." And then we hired a chief operating officer and a chief financial officer. And we said, we're going to go to Maui. We bought our second home on Maui, and we could trust that they knew how to run things because that's how we had set it up.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I love that. I love that you said it took 5 years. The other thing that I'm curious about, it's you had a culture shift,
Mm,
a rather significant culture shift. And we know that, it takes more than money to change a culture. Talk to us about that change.
absolutely. Well, we had to change our mindsets because I tell you, before I started studying all this stuff, I must admit that I think we were more motivated by the almighty buck. What can we make? We know we need to keep this business going because before that, we almost had to close the company. We were almost out of business entirely because we were buying seats from Anchorage to Honolulu on scheduled carriers, and those scheduled carriers stopped flying between Anchorage and Honolulu. They just said, we don't want to be in this market anymore. And so we had people that had purchased Hawaiian vacations from us, and we didn't know how to get them to Hawaii. So, we sat there and it took it was a couple of years, no, gosh, maybe a year and a half of just kind of sitting there and somewhat twiddling our thumbs going, "Oh, what are we gonna do?" And we tried operating little tours over to Yukon Territory to go to Dawson City, but, that just didn't make up for not being able to get people to Hawaii. And then my husband, located a plane that, was flying between Anchorage and Tokyo on a summertime charter series, but the plane came from Hawaii. So it would fly empty from Honolulu to Anchorage so that it could do this charter flight over to Tokyo. And he said to that airline, he contacted them and said, we can put passengers on those empty planes between Hawaii and Alaska, and you can make money on those otherwise just deadhead segments. And it took a while for him to convince them that this was a good thing to do. And we ended up having to charter the entire plane. Now, that meant we had a big price tag for a whole plane. Whether we sold the seats or not, we were still paying this big price. Now, that was much more of a risk and much more of a financial undertaking than we had ever had before. And scary, but I went back to I talked about measurements and tracking. Well, I had the measurements of what we had produced in terms of volume, ticket volume in previous summers. So I compared, what had we sold in July, June, July, August in previous summers? How many seats had we sold? And I realized, oh, because this was only a once a week charter and it was just a single aisle plane. It was like a DC 8, I think. And okay, it was only 100 and whatever passengers. Yeah, we can do that because we've done that before. So that gave us the courage to say, all right, this is a gamble, but it's, a calculated risk. So we can do this. And, we just, you know, start praying. And my husband became the best salesman ever that summer, making sure that he was, making sure every seat was sold on that plane. And we did. It was full. And so that gave us the confidence to go on and charter more planes, bigger planes, more frequency. We got up to where we were running like big wide body jets, like over 300 passengers 5 times a week in the high season. Yeah. So we were carrying like 35,000 passengers a year between Anchorage and Honolulu.
Okay, so that's extraordinary growth, and I know that requires a different type of operating model. What
Yeah.
was
Well, that was where the things got really messy. We had this small
I
team and
love your transparency.
nightmare. We had this small team and the business that I had started when I first moved to Anchorage, I had to close that business and put full-time attention on this one when we started chartering jets because I'm like, okay, and we're betting the farm.
Uh-huh.
Got my attention. So, it was all very manual. Like I said before, we were taking bookings by phone. And we did have an in-house reservation system, but that network was just within our office. So it out to the internet. And so we had systems and stuff, but I remember a day that we were hiring a new res agent because, phones were ringing and we didn't have enough people to answer them. And I hired this gal and I said, there's the phone, go answer it. That was my training. That was messy. Well, what do I say? And I just kind of threw stuff at her. So, we realized, oh, okay, that's not right. we can't do this. So then we had to start creating training procedures. And eventually we ended up creating a class where we would put reservations agents, like maybe hire a half a dozen reservations agents at a time and put 2-week training where we had a curriculum and we had it all scheduled out 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for 2 weeks before we would let them answer the phone. And this is where we figured out, okay, we have to be better at serving our customers than just having somebody pick up the phone and say hello. So it was all, one step at a time, one kind of ugly step at a time, and learning bit by bit how to create a system. Because I think in those days I didn't know what a system was. We did stuff. But in those years between going to college and we're also working with our mentors, Robert Kiyosaki was one of our mentors, and he said, "Get this book, The E-Myth by Michael Gerber, read it." And we did that day. And it was like, oh, damn. Okay. This is what we have to do. We got aggressive. We were meeting up with him in Hawaii, and we flew back to Anchorage and said, all right, team, this is what we got to do. This book is telling us how to set up these systems. And so we would act what we were learning. So that was the key. It's not just read it in a book and, oh yeah, that's a great idea, but you actually take action, use that idea, put it into play.
That brings up another question. I mean, you brought in the TQM system to your organization. And thinking from a resource perspective, you're still running the company, you're still doing the day to day, and you're training your team. How did that work? How did you actually implement that?
Well, for one thing, we were exhausted. We were, you know, we were trying to have a second child and it didn't happen. You know, we didn't have time for that. The doctor said you have to do certain things. And I went, oh no, I don't have time for that. We did eventually have a second child, but it was like, a while later
Yeah.
after we've gotten systems into place. But yeah, so it just, you get these ideas and you have to figure out, okay, how do we implement them? How do we execute them? So
Mhm.
it's not as simple, make it sound simple as like, oh, you get an idea and just execute it. Well, you have to figure out how to make that particular idea work in your business. And so sometimes, sometimes it was messy. Sometimes we would have, fits and starts. And it's like, okay, we try this. And okay, well, that's not working too well. Okay, let's adjust. Let's, make a correction over here. It's sort of like, when if you have a sailboat, for example, and you've got a point A to point B trip in mind, well, sailboats don't go in a straight line. They tack back and forth. And so we were doing a lot of that. We were tacking back and forth, correcting, correcting, correcting. And, certain things would go well for a while and then something would, break somewhere in the chain. There'd be a break. So it's, okay, what just went wrong? And we learned one of the things Robert Kiyosaki said is that when something goes wrong, look to the system. Don't look at the person. Don't blame the person. Figure out what happened with the system. So we learned to do that, and our team appreciated that because we weren't like chewing them out for what the hell. So yeah, so they would cooperate with us. We were a team. We were part of the team, and say, okay, how do we make this better? What should we do? And we got their input, and that, of course, is an empowerment too, and gets the team even more aligned and excited because they realize that they were part of it. They weren't just taking orders. And if you want to stay in charge of your business and if you want to stay hip deep in the day-to-day details, keep just giving orders and don't let them think for themselves. That's how to maintain that kind of chaos and stress on your life.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Not to mention the turnover and dissatisfaction and all that good stuff that goes with that.
Yeah. Talking about culture.
So this was an incredible journey that you took, and in hindsight, I imagine the education that you received during this journey was irreplaceable. I mean, it's not, and it's beyond an MBA. It's right. Are there regrets that you have?
Oh, sure, sure. We made mistakes. I can't think of all of them now, but there were plenty. And there were times that we would try to expand our operation. We tried flying to Spokane or flying from Spokane and Boise to Hawaii, and well, those markets just didn't receive us that well. And so we made a go of it, and then okay, they're not buying it, so we'll we'll stop. So just, things that you try, you bet. There's all kinds of things along the way. And, hiring is always a guessing game. I have so many people say, oh, you just have to find the right people. Yes, to a certain extent, that is true. I mean, there's, good people and bad people, I suppose. And there's also people with certain talents that, you want to find the right talents. And so we got better and better at screening for the kind of people that would be successful in our kind of culture. And then we had a little motto that John and I would say, well, let's just fire them before we hire them, which means yeah, you would just lay it out for them. Okay, this is the kind of company we have, and this is our culture. This is what will fly, pardon the pun, and this is what doesn't. And if you can't live with these kind of rules and with this kind of expectation, don't join this firm. And sometimes people would join the company, and then they would eventually like deselect themselves, usually, because they just couldn't keep up because it was a paced business, but it was fun. It was a really fun business. And when we won, we didn't just hand out checks. We would celebrate. We would have huge parties. I mean, we would rent limousines and take everybody to a five-star restaurant out of town a ways. And everybody would get all dressed up. And when we take weekend trips, in fact, one of the weekend trips was we took everybody to Las Vegas for the night. So yeah, it was a great time. And the mistakes, one of the best lessons that anyone can learn is to accept your mistakes as part of your learning. You have to embrace them and say, okay, great. What did I learn from this one? And then just try to put a correction into the system so you're not making the same mistake over and over again.
Yes, 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 yes. Absolutely, absolutely. How important was it? And I know in your case it was probably a little bit different than what I'm thinking, but how important was it for you and your husband to really partner with building this company?
Yeah, yeah. And that can be challenging working with your spouse, you bet. Luckily, we did share values in common, and it was also fortunate that we have some complementary talents. So I was better at the team building and setting up the trainings and instituting the systems than he was. He was really good at negotiating all the contracts and finding those planes and making sure that we had the product to sell. And he was a great salesman too. So, there were lots of ways that, we would lean on him for his strengths and then they'd lean on me for my strengths. And whenever we had a problem, it was usually because one of us kind of stepped into the other's lane. Then we had to, step back and go, okay, you're stepping in my lane and I don't like it. And most of the time we would keep those disagreements private. Every once in a while, something would erupt in the middle of a meeting. But, we're people, we're human.
Yeah.
Everybody just accepted that. But for the most part, we were very much in lockstep, which is a good thing.
Did you guys have to be very intentional about like communication and like managing emotions and that sort of supporting emotions and that sort of thing, or was it kind of natural for you?
Looking back, it would have been really good to be more intentional about some of that stuff. I think we know a lot more now than we did when we were in it. But I think, yes, you have to learn how to communicate. And we used tools like we get this personalysis thing, learning about our personalities and how we can work together. And we brought people in to, teach us the whole team, how to work together. How do everybody's unique personalities fit in this? How do we communicate with each other? So yeah, there's lots of things that you can learn along the way to smooth things out and make sure that you're saying things in a way that the other person will understand because everybody's got a little different style of listening versus speaking. So yeah, there's so many things to learn. Yeah, you don't get this stuff in a college class. I don't care how good it is. Whatever MBA program you're in, you don't get this.
100%, 100%. One of my favorite books was The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And this is a software the CEO of a software company, and he's building like this multi-million dollar company. He's talking about this $1 million payment he had to make, by the end of the day, et cetera, et
Oh,
cetera. It's
oh
just like,
yeah.
you know what? That's the truth. That's the stuff that we go through. And the cool thing about it is, your story, my story, his story. I mean, it's like we kept going. even though things got hard, even though we didn't know how we were going to people from Anchorage to Hawaii. That's
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah, and then there was the time that the airline that we were working with was grounded by the FAA, and we had people in Hawaii that needed to get back, and we're like, "Uh-oh, now what do we do?" And it's just I mean, when the FAA grounds you, you don't get, like, notice. You don't have, like, a week to figure things out. It's like, "That plane is not going anywhere right now." And, "Okay, how many people do we have in Hawaii right now that need to come back?" And this is where my husband's talents came in handy, and he got on the phone to another airline and had to grovel and say, I need your plane." And, we had to pay through the nose for that plane, but we were going to do it because that was the R in our WERQ. We had to take responsibility. So we were responsible for getting those people back to Alaska, and we were going to pay whatever it took to get them back. And we did. And in fact, we took care of other passengers that same carrier had stranded other passengers that weren't part of our business at all, but we got them out too, so yeah. Mm.
Beautiful. You make it sound like it's just like, oh well, we just had to. I know it was hard. I
I
get
mean,
it.
little heart attacks happening.
I get it.
And then
Absolutely.
at the end of the day,
Absolutely.
where's the wine?
Okay, so you and your husband moved to Hawaii, or you bought a house in Hawaii. What's
That
the
was
end of what's the end of the story? I mean, you've told this story about this business that you guys built, and what's the end if
well,
there isn't?
we sold the business to Alaska Airlines in almost 18 years ago, because Alaska Airlines was moving towards being in the Hawaii market, and we could see that coming, because that's another one of our secrets to success in business is keep your eye on the horizon at all times, because you know what is going to be out there that you don't have any control over. So we were watching the industry and knew that Alaska Airlines was positioning themselves to enter the Hawaii market. We knew they'd start on the West Coast, but that eventually they'd come to Anchorage. So we said, now we've already competed against Hawaiian and Northwest, and we did well, but Alaska is maybe a different animal. So maybe this is a good time to sell. So we hired an investment banking firm, and with them, we put together a package and presented an offer or a proposal to Alaska Airlines that they buy us, because they could win the market from us or they could buy us. So which would be more expensive? Buying us, winning the market meant we would all, get into a fare war and everybody would cut fares. Nobody would make any money. That's not a win-win at
Right,
all.
right,
Because we had done such a good job of, by that time, really securing the customer loyalty in our market. The Alaskans loved us. And, we were able to compete against big airlines and win. So Alaska Airlines knew that. And it was public knowledge. And, the Department of Transportation can give them the statistics as to how many people were flying on our planes in and out of Anchorage. So they knew what kind of volume we were doing. So it didn't take that much for them to figure out, okay, that would be a difficult one to win that market. And we had a very solid place in the community. We were very supportive of our community. We were very generous with nonprofits in the community all over Alaska. And so we had a lot of support, a lot of loyalty. And Alaska would have to compete against that too. So in the end, of course, they decided, yes, it would be cheaper to buy us. And so we made a deal with them. It took 2 years to negotiate and structure and, get that deal finalized. And so that was, like I said, almost 18 years ago. And that would have been the perfect time for us to just, retire and enjoy our yacht and our home in Hawaii and travel around the world. But no, we found out about some small cruise ships that were bank owned in Seattle that were just sitting at a dock rotting. And we loved cruising in Alaska on our own yacht. And we thought, geez, these little ships would be perfect for doing a particular kind of cruising in Alaska that wasn't offered in those days, where you just leave from a port, a city, and just go out into the wilderness and play on your kayak and hike and do all these fun things. And just, when the whales were around, you just hang out with the whales and let them spout all around you. This would be a great product. So we eventually bought those 2 ships. It's kind of a long story, which I won't go into. We bought those 2 ships, and then another cruise line went bankrupt, and we bought 3 ships out of that bankruptcy and put money into the ships to fix them up because they were a little tired and run. And so we made them pretty again for the passengers, found a cruise line who would operate them for us. So we didn't have to worry about operating them or marketing them or anything. We just put the money into them and then leased them and just, collected the lease payments every month.
Nice. Very beautiful.
We did that for about 10 or 12 years.
Very nice. Very nice. This has been fun, but we are out of time, believe it or not. Tell me something. If you could leave our audience with something amazing to walk away with, what would that be?
Hmm. I think you've already asked me questions about this. It's like, how do you find the courage? How do you find the confidence? And that's really the main thing. To be an entrepreneur, you have to have courage and confidence and, base it on statistics and then go for it. Don't be afraid. Take calculated risks and have faith in yourself and in whatever other power you believe in. And just do it.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, yes. And you have a couple of things that you've got your mastermind program and a couple other things that you want our audience to know about. You want to share those?
Yes. Well, I have an online course, and I'm going to be rolling out a membership program that incorporates that course very soon. And the mastermind is a great way to get more hands-on time with me, so that I can help you fix your business and transform your life and your business. So the easiest way to do that is to just reach out to me. It's ralwest.com/let's talk. And let me find out a little bit more about you, and we can put our heads together and see how I might be able to help you.
Amazing, amazing. And you've got a fantastic newsletter that you send out on a regular basis as well.
Yeah, it's on LinkedIn. It's called Ral's Success Principles, and you can subscribe on LinkedIn. Yeah, and I've got a YouTube channel too.
I didn't realize that. Okay, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, yeah, and there's over 200 videos on the YouTube right now.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Well, thank you so much. This has been invigorating. It's been exciting. It's been inspiring for me. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
You're welcome, Rick, and thank you for the opportunity. It's a pleasure to talk with you.
Absolutely. Folks, thank you so much for watching or listening to another episode of the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. We'll catch you next time.